They say silence kills. But this time, it came with bullets. Ibrahim Traoré was sipping cold coffee when War walked into his office, dressed in sweat and panic. The doors burst open. Cabaret, his defense minister, looked like he'd sprinted through a battlefield. In his hand, a red-stamped folder. Eyes only. His voice cracked like a rifle shot. "Mr. President, we intercepted something last night. This changes everything." Traoré stood up slowly, eyes locked on his old friend. The last time he'd seen Cabaret tremble like that, they were under a mortar barrage in the academy, back when fear was raw, and dying was part of the training. "Show me," he said. The folder hit the desk like a bomb. Inside, a storm. Transcripts, satellite captures, encrypted comms. And at the top, a name that didn't belong in Burkina Faso. Source, Tel Aviv. For a few seconds, the air in the room stopped moving. Israel. Israeli intelligence had been operating inside the country. Not for weeks. Not months. 3 years. Gold mine data. Telecom intercepts. Even private residence bugs. They were everywhere. "They've mapped your life, Ibrahim," Cabaret said, voice like broken stone. "They know everything." The first decoded message was clean, clinical, heartless. Target Alpha confirmed. Gold mine production data transmitted. Local officials unaware. Traoré's fingers curled into fists. Target Beta operational. Presidential communications intercepts running smoothly. Subject unaware. His mind exploded. They'd been inside his phone calls. His late-night talks with his wife. His children. Every whisper, every breath, recorded. Target Gamma requires immediate attention. Iranian weapons shipment detected. Recommend intervention. This wasn't espionage. This was war. Then came the document that changed everything. Subject, Ibrahim Traoré. Threat level, critical. Dated 2 months before his election. A psychological breakdown. Predictions of Russian alliances. Anti-Western leanings. And a final section labeled neutralization options. Each option deadlier than the last. And just when it couldn't get darker, Cabaret handed him a photograph. Colonel David Ouedraogo, his chief of personal security. The man who prayed with his family. Who knew the names of his children. Sitting at a cafe. Across from a stranger. That stranger's ID? Eli Roth. Mossad operations officer. The betrayal hit like a bullet to the chest. Ouedraogo, the shadow beside him at every meeting, was feeding Tel Aviv. Asking casual questions. Steering him toward silence. Missing key talks, but always watching. "How many know?" Traoré asked. "Just us. And the 2 who found the signal. Sworn to secrecy." The rage inside him wasn't political. It was personal. And it wasn't over. Within 48 hours, they uncovered hell. 3 Israeli listening stations. Buried under fake telecom firms. Hidden cameras. Signal reroutes. One station was rerouting every byte of internet data through Israeli servers. Every login. Every transaction. Every message. But the worst part? A list. 3 names. Religious leaders who had publicly condemned Israeli actions in Gaza. All 3 murdered. All 3 blamed on jihadists. But the Mossad logs were clear. Targets eliminated. No attribution. Mission successful. Cabaret's voice cracked. "They killed our people. On our soil." Traoré's reply was ice. "Then they've declared war." And war was what they got. At 3:47 a.m., the strikes hit. Coordinated, lethal, surgical. Traoré himself led the raid on the capital's Mossad outpost. He didn't trust anyone else. What they found blew the lid off everything. A fully operational Israeli station. Inside, high-grade spy gear. Assassination tools. False passports. But behind a reinforced steel vault, Project New Canaan. 12 nations mapped. 12 African countries infiltrated. And the final file. Ibrahim Traoré's own execution plan. Date for weeks. Method, helicopter malfunction. Signed. Sealed. Scheduled. 72 hours later, the world watched as Ibrahim Traoré stepped in front of global cameras. Behind him, confiscated Israeli equipment, maps, documents, death orders. He spoke without fear. Today, we expose state terrorism committed by Israel against Africa, against sovereignty, against the people of Burkina Faso. He held up the proof. Maps, translations, orders to kill, videos of captured agents confessing. He wasn't just speaking to the media. He was speaking to the world. And Africa listened. The room was silent. The world wasn't. Within hours of Traoré's speech, the Israeli government fired back. Denial, deflection, accusations of fabrication. But the evidence was everywhere. Satellite imagery, cross-reference server logs, Israeli software signatures embedded in Burkina Faso's national grid, communications with operatives in Mali, Niger, Chad. It was too much to bury. And the streets of Ouagadougou lit up, not with fire, but with fury. Thousands marched. They weren't chanting for revenge. They were chanting for justice. 12 African ambassadors walked out of a UN session that day, holding a joint letter demanding international investigation into what they now called systematic espionage and extrajudicial assassinations by a foreign power. But in the shadows, not everyone was cheering. 3 days later, the first attempt came. A sniper, high velocity, from a rooftop facing the presidential residence. He missed. Barely. The bullet tore through a marble column inches from Traoré's chest. They caught the shooter. Passport said Senegal. Accent said Tel Aviv. He bit off his own tongue in the holding cell before intelligence could break him. 2 weeks after that, it got closer. Car bomb, packed with Semtex, parked outside his mother's house. The device was defused. But the message was clear. You exposed us. You bleed now. The third hit came from inside. One of Traoré's own guards, recruited through a fake NGO, paid in crypto, fed lies about Russian influence and foreign occupation. He tried to stab Traoré in the hallway outside a defense briefing. Didn't make it past the first punch. The president broke his wrist with one move and held him down until the rest came running. The betrayal had layers. Colonel Ouedraogo, his former bodyguard turned Mossad mole, was found dead in his cell. Suicide, they said, but the autopsy revealed a snapped neck and 2 broken ribs. Someone had silenced him to protect the network or erase the trail. By now, Traoré had stopped asking why. He knew. Israel wasn't just spying. They were controlling, manipulating, funding divisions, fueling chaos, turning African politics into puppet theater. And Traoré? He had torched the curtain. So the continent started waking up. First it was Mali, then Niger, then Guinea-Bissau. One by one, nations began rooting out embedded foreign units. They found the same Israeli tech, the same forged NGO fronts, the same kill orders, the same silence. But now the silence was cracking. The African Union called an emergency session. For the first time in 30 years, they passed a unanimous resolution condemning foreign intelligence sabotage on African soil. And it named Israel. Specifically, Traoré wasn't done. He ordered every Mossad safehouse dismantled, every Israeli-linked NGO audited. He nationalized all telecom infrastructure linked to foreign servers. And in one final move, he declassified the entire case. Everything. Photos, videos, wiretaps, spy names. The world saw it all. And that's when things truly exploded. Jerusalem went into lockdown. Mossad scrambled to recover assets. Embassies from East Africa to the Sahel closed overnight. Israel's global image, already bleeding, began to hemorrhage. But the price Traoré paid? It was personal. He couldn't sleep in the same room twice. His children were relocated under military guard. His phone was stripped of all software, converted into a bare analog device. His wife stopped smiling. And inside the presidential compound, there was a question no one dared ask out loud. How long could he survive? The man who exposed a continent-wide conspiracy had become the continent's most hunted. And he knew it. Still, he kept walking toward the fire. They came for his voice. When the bullets didn't work, when the bombs failed, when the blade couldn't reach him, they aimed at his words. International media outlets began a smear campaign. Suddenly, Ibrahim Traoré was no longer a hero in the headlines. He was a dangerous populist, a Russian puppet. a destabilizing figure in West Africa. Western think tanks released synchronized reports questioning his mental stability. CNN aired a special segment quoting anonymous intelligence sources claiming Traoré had fabricated the Mossad files to justify a military dictatorship. But the people weren't buying it. In the streets of Bamako, Niamey, Bissau, graffiti sprayed across walls screamed the same thing. Ibrahim didn't lie. Digital forensics experts from South Africa verified the documents. Former Mossad techs leaked confirmations. One even posted a full breakdown of Project New Canaan's command architecture before disappearing 2 days later. The truth was radioactive. And truth has enemies. That's when Traoré made his boldest move yet. He sent official requests to Russia, Iran, and China, proposing the formation of a new intelligence alliance for African nations, free from Western infiltration. The West panicked. American diplomats tried to strong-arm smaller nations into disavowing Burkina Faso. Trade deals were suspended. Aid packages were reassessed. Traoré didn't flinch. "We will eat stones," he said in a televised address. "But we will not eat lies." And that broke something. Tanzania expelled 2 Israeli advisors. Ethiopia shut down a joint cyber training program. Algeria offered to host the new African Intelligence Alliance. They called it the Sovereignty Pact. Within 30 days, 8 nations signed on. And Israel? They went silent, because the story had stopped being about spying. It had become a global embarrassment. A small African nation had exposed one of the most advanced intelligence networks in the world, and lived. But the cost kept rising. Burkina Faso's banks were hit with cyber attacks. Traoré's brother was poisoned in a staged accident. He survived, barely. The presidential convoy was ambushed near Fada, 3 guards dead. They were trying to break him, and he refused to crack. Instead, he doubled down. Every Friday, he released new files. One batch showed Mossad training private militias in Congo. Another exposed sabotage plans in Senegal. By now, the world couldn't look away. And Africa was waking up angry. They tried to cut the head off the movement. Traoré's inner circle started bleeding. His education minister, found hanged in his office. Official report said suicide. Autopsy said ligature marks inconsistent with self-infliction. His chief economic advisor, hit by a sniper outside a conference in Cotonou. No arrest. No footage. No trace. His personal pilot vanished, replaced quietly by someone vetted by foreign partners. Traoré refused to board the plane. 3 days later, that same aircraft exploded over northern Ghana. Everyone on board incinerated. He was no longer paranoid. He was a marked man in a country under siege. But instead of hiding, Traoré did the unthinkable. He went to the streets. No security detail. No armored car. Just him. A microphone. And a crowd. "They fear you," he said. "That's why they spy. That's why they kill. Because they know, if you wake up, the game ends." Footage went viral across the continent. Kids with burned phones watched it in internet cafes. Farmers played it over loudspeakers. Militants in the Sahel passed it between bunkers. The man they couldn't kill had become something worse than a martyr. He'd become contagious. And then came the tipping point. A whistleblower from Kenya leaked cables confirming that Mossad had active personnel in 10 African capitals, some posing as aid workers, others as telecom consultants, all connected to Project New Canaan. Burkina Faso's files had just been the tip. Traoré made the full archive public. 56 gigabytes of classified Israeli documents, operations, names, photos, kill contracts, budgets. It broke the internet. Overnight, embassies in Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique were stormed by protesters. An Israeli diplomat was chased through the airport in Kampala. In Brussels, African delegates walked out of a NATO security summit mid-session. The narrative had flipped. Traoré was no longer a lone voice. He was the echo of a storm. Even his enemies had to admit it, off the record. A leaked CIA memo said, Traoré's exposure of Israeli activity represents the largest single compromise of foreign operations on the African continent since decolonization. But back home, the pressure was boiling. Burkina Faso's economy was buckling under sabotage. Drones hit border checkpoints. Cyber attacks jammed national infrastructure. Foreign investment froze. Medicines ran out in rural clinics. Still, Traoré refused to surrender. He released another file dump. This time, a full plan to destabilize his government via opposition infiltration, Israeli handlers, fake protest funding, contingency coup d'etat. It had already begun. 10 parliament members arrested. For NGOs shut down. A warehouse in Bobo del Lasso raided. Inside, American dollars. Printing equipment. Riot gear. They weren't even hiding anymore. And neither was he. He made a final promise, televised under flickering lights during a blackout likely caused by another cyber attack. They wanted to kill one man, he said. Instead, they've awakened millions. I am not the target. You are. And they've failed. The lights never stayed on for long. Generators groaned in the background as Ibrahim Traoré addressed his cabinet by candlelight. There were no suits, no formalities, just war fatigues and loaded pistols on the table. This isn't governance anymore, he said. This is resistance. Outside, Burkina Faso was bleeding. Hospitals overloaded. Fuel shortages. Attacks on convoys. Digital blackouts. But inside something had changed. The fear was gone. What replaced it was fire. The Sovereignty Pact now had 17 member nations. Intelligence hubs were operating out of Algiers, Kinshasa, and Antananarivo. Every day, another country cut ties with Israeli-linked firms. Every week, new files dropped. And every single one confirmed the same thing. Israel had been playing chess across the continent while African leaders were still learning the rules. But now the board was flipped. And Traoré? He wasn't just playing. He was hunting. An elite task force called Unit 77 began operating in the shadows. Their mission: locate, expose, and neutralize all foreign intelligence assets on the continent. Whispers said they'd already intercepted 3 Mossad safehouses in southern Libya, one near Goma, and another embedded inside a diplomatic residence in Nairobi. No public statements. No arrests. Just silence. Permanent. Meanwhile, Traoré turned his focus to Europe. He accused the EU of shielding Israeli operatives. Released intercepted emails showing French officials warning Tel Aviv about potential raids in West Africa. Germany denied involvement, then quietly removed 5 consultants from their embassy in Ouagadougou. It didn't matter. The world knew now. This wasn't conspiracy. This was conquest. And Traoré had burned the blueprints. 1 year after the first leak, he returned to the same podium. Same voice. Same fire. Only this time, no notes. Just truth. You tried to own our gold, he said. You tried to own our airwaves. Our secrets. Our leaders. Our deaths. You sent spies. Sent killers. Planted lies in our homes. And when we exposed you, you set the world against us. But we are still here. The room stood still, breathless, and then thunder, applause, drums. Across the continent, cities projected his speech onto walls. It wasn't about Traoré anymore. It was about Africa. Not the Africa sold in documentaries. Not the Africa begging for aid. The Africa with teeth. The Africa that remembers. And now, the Africa that fights back.